So in word-based model, the assumption is that what is in the mental lexicon is words, whole forms. Okay? And then we have schemas where these forms fit. So I've given you here 3 Swedish verbs in their present tense. So they mean understand, write, and sing. In Swedish, the present tense verbs end in er. There is no person number inflection. So the idea of a schema is like if you see a word ending in er, it is probably a verb and it is in the present tense. So that's, it's not a rule, but you fit together that pattern. And one word can connect by to several or many schemas. Okay. So for these words, what I showed, begriper, skriver, and sjunger, they fit into the present tense schema. Well, so I already said this. And a schema can be applied to several words. So if you take them, you have the present tense schema, you have the past tense schema, and the past tense to these verbs is made by ablaut. Let's see. You skip the R and the root vowel changes. E to A, U to Ö. So ablaut is there. You have a schema of ablaut. Just notice there is no morphological analysis of the kind we've been doing. It is pattern matching. These words look together because of the ending. These words look together because they signify a specific tense, and the vowels, they have skipped what these words have. Okay. And then there are the infinitives. In Swedish, the infinitive ends in a vowel a, always. So if you see a word like this and it indicates an action, that's the infinitive. So this is another schema. Schemas can be connected, and the more connections, so this is another concept comes in, the concept of strength. A word is strong if it has connections into many schemas. Okay, and it can be strong by another parameter too, and that is frequency. But you can be strong by being connected into many schemas, or you can be frequent by yourself, and that makes you strong. So if you take like, so there are several, here I showed schemas that are specific for verbs. If you take the form write, skriva, and we can apply it, we can go and see what other schemas apply to that concept. So, and I'm afraid the zoom is again a little bit off, too big, so you'll have to look on the handout. But skriva goes into the schema of deriving nouns by an ing suffix. So it fits skrivning, molding, which is painting, and standing, which is cleaning. Deriving other abstract nouns by means of a suffix eri. And deriving complex nouns if you combine them with style. Okay. I showed you schemas in Swedish. I will go into more specific verb paradigms and the concept of a template, which is very similar to schemas, but we'll have more specific verb material. So the concept was introduced by Nigel Vincent in the 80s. What I show here is applications of this concept by Jenny Sasky. If we look at the infinitives of Spanish verbs that are going to end in ag, and then the preterite forms, which are past tense forms, then we see that there is vowel change from the infinitive into the preterite. Okay. The verb want, care, it's e, kiss. With the verb have, taner, the preterite will be u, tu. With poner, put, again we have u, so e goes to u, o goes to put. With the sir, say, we have e, and saber, no, u. So the vowel change is different for all these verbs. But what is so we can see that they're all different alternations. But what is significant and noticeable that it occurs always from infinitive into preterite. So if you remember the bay example with the derivation of pluractionals, where the tone changed, but in different ways, this is similar. But this is an inflection. With bay, the tone changed also in different syllables. This changes always in the root, from infinitive into preterite. So this is our template. And this is what we expect Spanish verbs to do. We'll look at Italian verbs, like udire. You'll see that there is one stem for the singular, indicative, and the same stem in the subjunctive. A different stem is used for first and second person plural, and then again the first stem of the singular is used for the third person plural. And like looked in isolation, it's like I don't want to learn Italian crazy verbs. I have to remember too many things. And we can go to look at another verb, but before we do that, just try to remember, okay, one stem for the singular, both indicative and subjunctive, and that stem is repeated for the plural, both indicative and subjunctive. The first and second person plural use another stem. And then we look at another Italian verb, dovere, and I thought, now I have to learn this. And I don't want to do that, but again, one stem for the first person for the singular, indicative and subjunctive, that stem is repeated in the plural. A different stem is used for first and second person plural. So again, we can record this. And go to the next verb, a completely different morphological structure. We see the same pattern. One stem for the singular, repeated for the third person plural. Another stem, first person, first and second person. And we can go on and just do this same thing. That remember, singular, one thing, same thing in third person plural, and then first and second use a different stem. So essentially, we don't have to, all we have to remember is that Italian verbs change stems according to this pattern. And that pattern is valid. that pattern is very productive synchronically across the language, and that pattern also draws, I mean, if you like, I spent too many years on completion, like changes of stem in verb inflection. But this is very useful, and one of the things about suppletion, like go went, and when people say, oh, this you can't account for this, it's crazy. But if you look at these things from a template point of view, well, you see that it's not as crazy as you think, because the Italian verb to go it has several steps, so there's suppletion. It's cool. This is what we expect verbs to go to have. But those steps are distributed according to the template that we saw with all other verbs. So it's not a haphazard distribution. It fits a template of the language. And templates are valid also in a diachronic sense, because it can be shown that when verbs change and language change in general, you will always have a drift from a template that is less populated to a template that is populated. So there is a drift to fit in. And in other terms, it's called, in a way, rhythm, because you want to rhyme with other words. That's the analogy drift. That if you have like a template of this kind that is very productive, Janiszewski, in the article I'm citing here, shows that in Romance languages, so Italian, French, Spanish, verbs to go changed from templates that were in later stages in mid-French and medieval Spanish, medieval Italian. They changed from templates that had very few members to templates that had a lot of members. So there is a drift that these templates exercise, and that's the drift of analogy. So if you hear something all the time that is being done, you start to fit other things into it. This is what analogy is. That's the principle. Okay. I'm going to show you this is what I applied the template thinking when I looked at in the evolution of go and went into English. So in Old English, you have two verbs to go. One is gangen, the other is gone. And gangen was regular, and it derived its past tense by ablaut. Gone had this completely form iode for the past tense. Gone and don formed a small template. Don was the Old English do. Ganga was a verb that got mixed with gan very quickly, and we don't know exactly what happened to it, but it's gone already in Old English text. But here we have a modest template of two verbs. You see that they match like on person and number inflection, and their past tenses are also both highly irregular. If we go to the Middle English period, we see that that template is breaking, because the present tense is okay, so there is stuff going on in the past tense. And there are three competing forms of the past tense of go. There is jede, vente, and gaide. So there was like a real effort and those forms to derive a regular form by the ed suffix. So there is competition in Middle English. Of these three forms, only one survived. we know which. So get and guide disappeared, and went survived. There is no reason in went like came from another verb. It came from the verb to turn. So there is no reason for it to be chosen if we follow the morpheme-based model, if we follow rules. The guide form should be the one that's gaining ground. But in the Middle English period, was the verbs that were gaining ground, were the verbs, and this was the productive template, was to derive the past tense by both by the tense suffix on verbs that ended in a nasal, the stems of a nasal, or sonorant. They all used a tense suffix. So mente, brente, dwelte, bilde. So the form vente, the way it was pronounced at that time, it fit in here in a much better way, whereas the other forms and the guide forms didn't have anywhere to fit. There were no templates where they could go. So this could be one account. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, but it's plausible, and there are other people who say the same thing. So a template can guide your evolution if it's strong enough, and that's a template in a specific period of time. Again, like I said, productivity is always like connected to specific periods of time. Templates can grow and cover a variety of words at a certain period of time. They can lose members. If you get too frequent, you will go out of the templates, then the template will get impoverished. Words that are highly irregular in this model are said to have their own templates. They don't need friends because they are strong by sheer frequency. Like, frequency in this kind of thinking is brute force. You don't go to any rules because you can survive the way you are. You're just being used a lot. So I'm giving you the French verb to be. The languages that have a verb to be of this kind, the Western European kind copula, that kind of copula is used in very many constructions as an auxiliary verb, which is why it's so frequent and it can survive with a lot of idiosyncrasy. So in a word-based model, this is its own schema. It doesn't apply to anything else, and nothing else has to follow. But the consequences of being frequent is also that you get eroded. So at some point you disappear because you become invisible, and something else has to replace you. So what I see as advantages of this model is that it's actually based on existing forms. When you describe a lexicon, you take forms that are encountered in actual language use. And you don't have to postulate some kind of underlying form that nobody has ever heard of, and there is no difficulty or arbitrary thinking of saying what is basic and what is derived. There is no need for that. You don't overuse segmentation. Not everything has to be segmented. Some things are not segmented at all. If you think about schemas, not necessarily segments, you account for non-segmental morphology as well, so it does well on that. Productivity is something important, frequency is also important, and those are factors that do drive a lot of changes and the way our structure looks like. These things are extremely important. And it's also, it can be used to explain facts of change in a very plausible way, without making up things. Because this is what there is a Polish guy, Jerzy Welna, who arrived, when you again, we worked on Wednesday approximately the same time, and he came with pretty much the same kind of thinking and the same kind of results. So if two people independently come to one and the same thing, there is probably something to it. But nothing is written in stone in science, so could always be somebody who comes and digs up other data from Middle and Old English, and it will be different. It will be a different story. But the point is, we don't assume things without seeing that there is ground for it. What we assume is that there is analogy in language, and that analogy can be shown and demonstrated in very many ways. One of these ways is these templates that are not imaginary templates, because we can show data that demonstrate their existence. So this is the good things about a word-based model. Not everything is good, because what you assume that all languages have is that they have something that you can describe as a word, and that is a big assumption. Not all languages, like polysynthetic languages, talking about words in our sense is completely meaningless. They don't have words in the same way that in Navajo that was so much hated, like saying that something is a verb. Well, yeah, it's a verb, but it has to take a lot of other things, and it cannot be a verb by itself. You always have to utter it in a certain kind of situation and modify it by 1,500 other things. So you don't have a verb in the same sense that you have a verb in Turkish or in English. You simply don't. So a Navajo word is very different from a word in agglutinative or inflectional languages. And that word-based model, again, it doesn't work very well. It's a problem that when we come up with these models, we always have to start from language facts that are most familiar to us, and then we try to apply them to languages that are far away from us. So it's very unclear. These schemas that I'm so enthusiastic about, I'm not so sure that they apply to now. In fact, I think they don't. So again, if we think about Turkish, how many schemas apply to a Turkish word? It's something questionable, something that we're going to start at least reason about next time when we start the class. And the truth of the matter is, both that morpheme-based model and a word-based model, they're two extremes. So a model that comes close to reality has to be something that allows the storage of words and that allows the storage of morphemes. And we have to differentiate which words are stored, which morphemes are stored, and that is not always an easy question to answer. And here I want to bring Bybee in. Bybee is a older topologist and morphologist, but she's one of the very important and big names in modern morphology. So I think I mentioned her book, Morphology. Her book is old, from 1995. It's called only Morphology, but if you want a psychologically informed book on morphological structure, to this day, that's the book. So according to her,